Greetings, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining for Soulfire Soil Carbon 3D. This is the finale Skillshare of a series that we've been hosting for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color to level up our land-based skills. I'm so excited for today's workshop. My name is Naima, and I serve as the program director here at Soulfire Farm. Soulfire is an Afro-Indigenous centered community farm, and we are committed to uprooting racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system. I'm going to pause for our interpretation as today's workshop is bilingual in Spanish and English.
Hola, buenas tardes, saludos a todos. Bienvenidos al taller de 3 dimensiones del carbono del suelo. Este es el primer taller de comparte conocimientos virtual, esta es la serie final de la serie, el taller final de la serie completa. Y mi nombre es Naima y estamos honrados de estar coordinando este taller con el equipo. Y yo tengo el puesto de director de programa aquí en Soulfire Farm. Soulfire Farm es una comunidad centrada en las personas afroindígenas y una finca y comunidad centrada en estas personas comprometidas a desmantelar el racismo y a sembrar la soberanía en el sistema alimentario. Y hicimos pausa para poder proporcionar esta interpretación consecutiva, ya que el taller de hoy se llevará a cabo en español y en inglés.
Thank you, Nayra. So yes, we're so grateful.
Do I give interpretation instructions now?
Yes, in just a moment.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Adelante.
Thank you, Nayra, one of our interpreters for today. And yes, we're so grateful to be able to offer live interpretation and bilingual resources for this workshop. And in order to hear the interpretation, you'll need version 5.0 or later of the Zoom app. So hopefully you have that, but if not, this would be a good time to disconnect, download it, and return to the call. So I'm going to pass it off to our interpreters to introduce themselves, and then we'll get the interpretation started after Nayra translates what I just said, or interprets. Thank you so much.
Y gracias, estamos emocionados de poder proveer interpretación para crear este espacio bilingüe y para poder conectarse a la interpretación necesitarán la versión 5.0 o la versión más actualizada de la aplicación de Zoom en su aparato. Entonces necesitarán descargarla y para hacerlo pueden encontrar el enlace en el chat en unos momentos. Y ahora vamos a dar el anuncio de cómo conectarse a la interpretación. So, greetings everyone. My name is Nayra and I am joined here by my colleague Yudith, and we will be providing interpretation in Spanish and English. Soulfire has made a commitment to language justice, and in order to create a multilingual space, these are some ways we can all support. Please remember to speak slowly and honor pauses, especially when you're reading, as we tend to get pretty excited. If you need you to slow down, we will go on camera and make this signal. If we need you to speak up, we may go on camera and do this signal. And if we hear more than one voice speaking at a time, you may see us going on camera and doing this signal. For folks listening in Spanish, you'll notice that we're using E endings instead of O or A for gendered terms. That is not a mistake. That is an intentional practice of integrating non-binary gender in our language, and it is an essential part of language justice. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Nayra y estoy acompañada por mi colega Yudith y estaremos realizando interpretación en español y en inglés. Soulfire se ha comprometido a la justicia del lenguaje y para crear espacios multilingües juntos, aquí algunas maneras que ustedes pueden apoyar. A favor de recordar de hablar despacio y honrar las pausas, especialmente cuando están leyendo, ya que tendemos a emocionarnos en esos momentos. Si necesitamos que hablen más despacio, vamos a activar nuestra cámara y usaremos esta señal. Si necesitamos que hablen más fuerte, usaremos esta señal. Y si escuchamos más de una voz a la vez, usaremos esta señal para indicarles que hablen solo una persona a la vez. También para quienes están escuchando en español, van a notar que usamos una terminación de E en vez de A o O para los términos que se refieren a género. Esta es una práctica intencional para incorporar y reconocer a personas no binarias y es una parte esencial de la justicia del lenguaje. So with that said, you should be able to see a globe icon on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen or a three-dot menu if you are connected through a phone or tablet. And you'll be able to click on this and click on language interpretation and then select the language that you want to listen and participate in. Y ya dicho eso, la interpretación se activará en unos momentos y verán un icono de globo aparecer en su pantalla si está conectada por computadora o un menú de 3 puntitos al fondo y a la derecha de su aparato móvil o tableta. Harán clic en estos y luego en interpretación de idioma y seleccionarán el idioma de su preferencia en el que quieren escuchar y participar. If you have any issues connecting to the feature, please don't suffer in silence. Communicate that through the chat so that one of our team members can support you with that. Si tienen cualquier problema conectándose a la interpretación, favor de no sufrir en silencio, déjenos saber a medio del chat y alguien de nuestro equipo les puede ayudar. Thank you and we may now begin. Gracias, ya podemos comenzar.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nayra. And Yudith, if you just want to say hello and wave at folks so folks know the other person who's interpreting, feel free now, and folks can go ahead and choose their language. Just give you one moment, Yudith, if you want to wave, and no worries if not. Okay, great. So we are so grateful to be together in this space. Some folks have already begun introducing themselves. If you haven't, feel free to say your name, your pronouns, where you're coming from, anything that's exciting to you about the content we're about to get into, which is so relevant in this time where we're experiencing the symptoms of climate catastrophe, which affects so much our soils, and also the way we care for our soils stands to really support and collaborating with land towards climate resilience. So before we jump in, I just want to let folks know that we are recording this session, and that's to be shared with you all, registered participants, and internally with our team. And I was really moved just reading some of what has brought you here. You know, some folks just got access to land or are newer beginning farmers. Some are third generation regenerative farmers that are working to build soil. Some folks said that for the first time in over a decade, they're returning to their native lands in Mexico. And so many people who are working within their families and communities to build soil that has been depleted, and in order to grow food and medicine for their communities. So much props to all of you who are coming as participants, and we'll get into it. I want to invite my teammates to introduce themselves, and then I will introduce our featured presenters. And again, you're also welcome to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't yet. So I will pass it to Ale.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ale, and I am here supporting with the chat translation.
Thanks, Ale. Brittany.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Brittany, pronouns she, hers, and I will be supporting with navigating the chat, letting folks in, queuing our awesome facilitators and instructors today.
Thank you so much, Brittany. And I'll just mention that Yudith is our second interpreter, who is now off in interpretation world, but we'll make sure y'all get to see Yudith's face before we close. And thank you so much to this team. And before I introduce our featured presenters, one final housekeeping piece, if we could go to the next slide. In order to make sure that everybody is matched with folks who speak and understand the same languages as them, we're going to rename our Zoom name now to include a symbol before our name that can indicate whether we are Spanish speakers, English speakers, or bilingual speakers. So if folks can take a moment to do that now, that will support us in making sure you're matched with people who can understand you and speak clearly to you. All right. And with that, we can stop the screen share and I will introduce our featured facilitators for today. So we're so grateful to be joined by Rafael, aka Rafa Aponte, who is an Afro-Puerto Rican farmer born and raised in the Millbrook housing projects of the South Bronx. Rafa has over 15 years of experience working as both a community activist, an advocate, and educator. He is a graduate of Farm School NYC, the certificate program in urban ag, and has since relocated to Tompkins County to establish Rocky Acres Farm in Freeville, New York. This farm has been popping since 2013. It's a 10-acre farm that really focuses on the sustainable production of local vegetables, eggs, and meat for low resource communities, as well as education, really in the spirit of each one teach one and social justice. Rafa, we're so grateful that you're here with us. And joined by Rafa is Briana Alfaro, who is currently serving as Soulfire's soil carbon field researcher. And Briana brings experience as a grower, an herbalist, a writer, and an activist. She grew up in San Diego in Kumeya lands and currently lives in Cortland, New York, which is Haudenosaunee lands. And yeah, she developed her interest in farming while traveling through Central America in relationship with small-scale farmers, as well as visiting her dad's homeland in Mexico, where her father redistributed land to peasants after the revolution. And Briana grows and cuts flowers and herbs for medicine. And Briana, we're so honored to have you here. So without further ado, I will pass it to you to take us forward. Thank you so much. Rafa, do you want to take the mic?
Yes, apologies. Yes, it's so good to be here with y'all. Can we see the slides? I don't know, it's not showing up on mine. Beautiful, thank you so much. And can we go to the next? Oh, here we go, perfect. So good to be here with y'all and just share a little bit about my journey. And then some of the reasons why we do some of these things in the first place, right? You know, testing, science, the sacred, our ancestors, all these things get woven into our soil. It's the thing beneath our feet that we don't give enough credit and honor to on a daily basis, but the building block for everything that we have ever built, whether it's been a building, whether it's been food that we put into our systems, medicines, knowledge. And it's also one of the things that we give to future generations. So extremely, extremely super important. And so happy that I get to work and I had the opportunity to work with everyone here on this soil carbon project to kind of quantify this. Carbon has been on the lips of a lot of scientists, politicians, policymakers, and all the likes, but it is something that we have had an ancient relationship with throughout history. We are carbon. We are people made of carbon as living beings. But we're going to dive into the soil and really want to give some tools to people, whether you're in the lab, whether you're in the field, whether you're at home, whether you are giving food to your community or growing seeds for them, that you can assess the health of those things. Much like any other living organism, you can do a health assessment. So here's some tools that we're going to be using for that. But yeah, that's just kind of the overview. I hope folks are really excited about this, that people are bringing their questions and bringing it down to the soil that they're familiar with, whether it's under your fingernails right now, whether it's under your feet, whether you're thinking of ancestral homelands, just to bring those things present and, situate yourself there as we go through some of these things. So yeah, without further ado, let's go into the actual soil carbon project, right? So that's the big overview. And here's some of the things. This is how we've done this so far. Briana?
All right, thank you so much for laying out what we are setting out to do today, which is a lot. I get really excited to talk about soil and soil health. So this is really awesome to get to share with you all and to hear your thoughts and what you all are curious about and doing with your soil. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of this project that I've been working on since I believe it was March. We have a research component. So I've been working with these 5 fabulous farmers across the Northeast. Rafa is one of them. Ulum, who I see here in the community, has joined us at Global Village Farm, participated in this research project. Karen Washington of Rise and Root, Leah at Soul Fire. And then this is my compadre who grows next to me, in the middle photo at the bottom 3 photos, Trinidad, who, we just learn side by side with each other every year. So I've been working with these folks to do these tests in their fields and sort of think about like which of these tests are engaging, which of them teach us the most, which of them, are kind of worth investing in any equipment to do them on a regular basis. So that's sort of the basis of the research project. And then taking that knowledge and building out resources to share with the greater community. We have made a written guide, which you all should have received in an email. And so there's a lot of resources there and step-by-step instructions on how to do all the tests that we've worked with. And then we have videos as well. So those are all meant to be complementary. And so check those out. We can go to the next slide. And I'll slow down. I just realized I'm probably speaking very quickly. There's a lot we can talk about today. I just wanted to give this like really brief overview about soil and thinking about what soil is. I've learned so much the past year and a half that I've really been diving deep into soil science and soil studies. Soil is a living porous system made up of mineral and organic particles that interact with animals, fungi, bacteria, plant residue, water, and gases. All right. It is sand, it's clay, it's silt. You may have heard those words before, but it's so much more. We have a living ecosystem of creatures, big and small and tiny, who all perform different parts in this show. when doing research for this project, I came across the term soil livestock in reference to this community of workers. And I just really like that term because I think it really brings home the idea that these are also members of our farms and gardens that we are also responsible for taking care of. We have the engineers like the earthworms that move through the soil. They take food from the surface of the soil down to feed others. They create space for water, air, and roots. We have shredders, which is another term I learned, which includes animals like springtails that help break down leaves and other organic materials so that other organisms can feed. We have fungi, which are just so magical and plentiful if we're lucky and if we're creating home for them. And they help create glues that hold soil together for more stable structure, which I've learned is just so important to soil health. And I think we all kind of know that a little bit intuitively when we're playing with it, when we have our hands in the soil. And that's kind of the basis of all of these tests and why we're doing this is just really to bring home the idea that we know so much intuitively. And the last thing I'll just say is when I kept thinking about bringing these soil health principles and soil carbon sequestration tools together and connecting with farming and practice, I just kept imagining a home, a habitat, and how we can provide a safe home with enough food for these creatures to thrive and to do their work, which is really imperative to having healthy soil, healthy foods, and healthy environments. We can go to the next slide. So there's so many ways to understand our soils. I listed just very few, just a few. We can think about soil type, which we can look up on soil maps, which if you're nerdy, which I imagine you all are a little bit nerdy if you're here on an afternoon enjoying a soil health webinar, my fellow soil nerds, look up your soil type on a soil map. And I believe we're sharing some resources, some links in the chat to look those up. And there are also links in the guide as well to access those websites. So that's sort of a starting point. We have soil texture, which we can assess ourselves with our own hands, just digging a hole, reaching and touching and feeling. There's a great demonstration for that in the Liberation on the Land soil health video. And we've also linked within the guide resources to understand soil texture as well. And these I group into the category of sort of like the soil type is an inherent soil factor that's really kind of like the basis for understanding a lot of other things as far as the soil. So I think that's like a really great starting point is understanding your soil type. Understanding your soil texture, which can change with dynamic factors like how you manage your soil. And then, we can send our soil to a lab, which I totally recommend. I love these in-field analyses. They really show us a lot, and they can show us things that lab tests can't. But I think that they are complementary. I find it's valuable to do both. And then we have like the in-field tests, which again, I think is complementary, offers a different perspective to what lab analysis can show us. Again, I just want to reiterate, we know so much. There's so much we can understand on our own. And the purpose of this guide is really to give us some tools, some perspective to really understand beyond like touching the soil with your hands, like what other perspectives can we take? How can we understand the principles of really being soil health stewards by doing different investigations and sort of seeing where we're at, seeing where we can be. And understanding the impact of our management practices. I think that's something really valuable. If you do these tests, even if you just choose one to do year after year, you can really like understand the difference that you're making by practicing good farming that holds soil health at the heart. And then I just want to urge you to be curious. Just touch your soil, smell your soil, just be curious about it. And we can go to the next slide. All right, and really I don't have a lot to say about this other than soil health refers to how well the soil is functioning from biological, physical, and chemical perspectives. If you sort of think through this, these ideas, they'll help you to understand these tests and why lab tests are complementary and why we hold space for them and what they mean. Just sort of thinking through, like, you know, the soil biology, the physical aspects, like water literally draining through the soil, the chemical aspects, which, you know, often we do understand that information through a lab test. There are also ways of understanding, such as smell or taste, which we didn't go into with these resources, but that's an area that I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about. And I believe Farming While Black has a little bit of discussion on smell and taste as well. We can go to the next slide. All right, and really, I just want to drive home the fact that, like, organic matter is at the heart of soil health, and that, you know, if you really understand organic matter, what it is, how it behaves, you can just better understand how to manage your soil in order to create that healthy ecosystem. The amount of organic matter present in a soil, which we call the soil organic matter, is the foundation for how healthy a soil is. So if you stop and think about that for a minute, how can we increase organic matter? What are the different ways? There's so many, and really the best methods are unique to each farm. You know, what resources do you have available? What is your inherent soil type? What is the condition of your soil right now, and what does it need? And then thinking about providing an abundance for this ecosystem. And also not only an abundance, but diversity too. It's all about relationships, just like any other community. And we each all need different things, and the life in our soil, the microorganisms, the different soil livestock, they all have different needs. So providing a variety of sources of organic matter will help to increase the overall organic matter, including the living organisms. And connecting this to carbon sequestration, soil organic matter is made up of approximately 58% carbon. So really that's where the carbon is. There are different types of carbon. There are less stable types of carbon and more stable types of carbon. And these kind of connect to this idea that I kept coming across in doing research about soil organic matter. We think about I've heard this referred to as the living, the dead, and the very dead, and you all may have heard this before. The living we can think of as like the fungus, the microorganisms, the roly-polies, the earthworms, all the things that are living in the soil, even living roots. And then the dead, the leaf litter, the recently dead microorganisms, fungus, etc. Those are all the less stable types because they're still sort of being processed, they're still alive, they're still undergoing a lot of processes. And then the very dead are the most stable type of organic matter, and that's where like the long-term carbon storage happens. And that is all those things I listed above, the microorganisms, the dead materials, but they've been processed so much by the other pieces of the ecosystem that they are now in a really stable form that can't be processed anymore. And that carbon is just really able to store within the soil. Organic matter that's inside a soil aggregate decomposes at a slower rate. So the more aggregates we can make and the more carbon we can store inside of them, the more carbon we can build up in the soil. So the guide goes into this a little bit more, but we'll talk about soil aggregates just briefly a little bit later. But having real good soil structure, including good aggregation, creates an environment where we can have more of that really stable carbon. But we need all the types of the carbon. So I will leave it at that. As you can tell, I can just go on and on and on. All right. I will pass this off to Rafa, who is going to bring us to our first activity. Oh, did we skip one? I'm sorry, I forgot. So this is just a list that's actually, I pulled from the guide. These are our recommendations for soil organic carbon sequestration strategies, minimizing disturbance, applying organic amendments, rotating crops, planting cover crops, growing shrubs and trees, including livestock, and mulching. And I'm sure you all have heard about these recommendations before. Once you sort of put all these things together with the test, you'll start to understand why these practices connect to building organic matter, creating that healthy habitat for the soil livestock, and storing more carbon. I believe now we can move on to our activity.
Yes. So we want everyone to go, form into their role as a practitioner in assessing soil health. And I love the way that you said that, Briana. It's how well the soil is functioning, right? That's an indicator of health. And what's it functioning to what end, right? All those pictures that are in there are also, those are part of, those were taken in at location. These are things that are not in a textbook, but alive and well on all of our farms. So to get to you guys and you folks to be able to talk to each other around this, we want you to introduce yourselves. We want to separate into groups of 3. The person who lives farthest south will get to go first, and we'll figure out geography with each other. And then introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, where in this globe are you, and maybe a second about your project. Think about your soil. What are you curious about? What do you notice about it? What do you want to find out? Maybe some questions pop into your mind from some of the things that we've heard so far. And just take 2 minutes per person to kind of try to hit these 3 bullet points. And then we'll come back and we'll have a little bit of time to share.
Okay, thank you, Rafa. Here we go.
Okay, welcome back, folks. Are we all present and broken in?
Like some folks are still pouring back in, but we're arriving, yes.
Okay.
All right, we got a critical mass, go ahead.
Okay, beautiful. So, I mean, just to share a little bit about, I'm interested in what came out of our small pockets of community that we just formed. I feel like each one is unique. So we're going to share out, just take a look at some of the things from the chat, and maybe very briefly, just touch on someone who had a takeaway. Is there anything that somebody wants to share out in the chat very briefly? A curiosity that came up. Okay, I'm seeing management is key and staying organized. Excellent. A little bit more about curiosities. What's in contract to topsoil, right? So some things around vocabulary. Are contractors the only ones that have access to topsoil? What does their topsoil look like? Vibing with the soil, I love that. Building with minimal resources, a commitment to no-till, contributing to more soil health. So these are just a couple things. I just want to name them as they keep flowing. These are things that are coming into consciousness for us. And we all have something to contribute and share, and we all have a relationship with soil. So I just want to dive into some of the practices behind this. So we can go to the next slide. And these are coming from some context that I'm familiar with, especially growing. Before I ever farmed, I gardened. I gardened in community gardens in the South Bronx. And if you take a look at that first picture, that's from the Bronx in the 70s, which were a site of, a series of arsons to collect insurance by negligent landlords. That was basically, there was no remediation that was taken on part of the city or some officials, but that lot on the left is what people decided to turn into a community garden because it was necessary. So from those soils, from those burnt buildings, I love the artwork that's also on those false promises, broken promises around housing, around food, around land. These were the community's response to this. But in speaking of that, some of the land that we were literally growing food and community on was contaminated. It was toxic to people and to plants and animals. So something that we want to measure in our soil health is maybe the presence of toxins. What are some of the things, growing in urban environments? Lead, arsenic, aluminum, some of the heavy metals are very present in the soil. What do you do once they're there? The soil is still there, it's still alive. What do you do now that these are present? And then talking about some carbon sequestration aspects. If you look at the picture all the way on the right, this is the Tierra Prieta in Brazil. And it's basically one of the places where now, Dutch climate scientists are now heavily researching this, but feet thick is this beautiful dark black soil that is super high in biochar, right? So these little crystalline soil structures that hold all kinds of life and really sequester carbon in a level that regular soil does not. So ancient technologies, right? Indigenous technologies, these are things that our ancestors have used to grow food, soil, and soil health for generations. And then dead center, this woman who's cultivating some beautiful cabbages and what looks like sugarcane behind her. This is a picture from Puerto Rico in the 1950s. So we get brought some of these images from the WPA And this one in particular is Rio Piedras in Puerto Rico. But perfect example, no tractors, very hilly, rocky soil. We have a question about the WPA, Works Progress Administration, and I'm sorry if I butchered the acronym, but a governmental agency with the USDA to kind of capture some of the rural life that was going on at the time. Part of the New Deal that was given. So important to talk about that, because here we are talking about the Green New Deal. This is an effort that came out of the New Deal back then. But what this woman is doing, she's growing healthy soil. There is no till, there was no tractors available, but you can see a diversity of crops, polycultures going on there. So again, just to name those things. And let's go to the next slide. So one of the tests that we can use, right, given all the things that we just spoke about, one of my favorite tests is an earthworm count. So literally you can see, you take a chunk of soil and you count how many earthworms are present. This is a gigantic living organism, given the nature of soil. And you can see them with your naked eye, and you can count them, and they're a very good indicator on, your soil structure, if water is infiltrating, and they do so much for the soil. They create pathways for roots, they create more organic matter. Worm castings are super rich in nutrients and great for plants. So a very easy test, right? You're out in the field, anywhere you go, you can count the earthworms. And let's go to the next slide. And here's another very easy test to do. I love these tests because you can do them with what you have on hand. If you take a look at the picture, that is a pipe, like a cut section of pipe. And you place it on the soil, you pour an inch of water onto there, and you see how fast the soil, the water drains through the soil. And you're testing the infiltration rate. So plants cannot take up nutrients without water being present. Their roots need water to access the nutrients. So understanding how fast water runs through them and over the roots can give you an indication of how quickly or how long your plants can uptake nutrients from the soil. It's also a really good indication if you're growing on different places, different sites. In case of big water events, like the ones we just had with Hurricane Ida, right? How fast is that water going to drain away from your soil as well? You can have, you can see how quickly it takes for an inch to go through, and then imagine the foot or so of water that is present washing through your soils. So another quick test to observe. And next slide, please. And this one, so this is it's called the Solvita test. That is just the brand name for this in particular test. And I like this one. This actually shows how the soil breathes. So you're literally measuring the CO2 levels that come off of your soil after putting them in a through jar, shake it up, you get all the aggregates in there. And then you can use this little CO2 color-coded strip to see how much CO2 is produced from that soil sample. So from there, you can get a quick snapshot of your soil breathing. What produces the CO2 is all the living organisms that are in there, all the microbes, all the soil livestock that are in there that could that actually contribute to really like the respiration of our soil. Our soil breathes. And I think it's important to say with all these different tests, you might be tempted to do them just one time. Great, do it once a year if you want to, do it once. But they just offer a snapshot of that particular time frame for that piece of soil. You might want to do this test again, spring and fall. you might want to do it again after, things like heavy rains can affect this. Or same with any of the other tests. If the soils are already waterlogged, you will have different indicators. But, like any other living organism, these things will change over time. So it's important to understand how those things flow. So you might be like, oh, I'm freaking out. I have no soil biology going on here. I got a 0. Wait for the rains to come, try it again, and then you can see if you have more microbes present. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. And I will give it to Briana.
All right, so we have our activity, our second activity. So we'll be in groups again. And with this activity, we are going to provide you with a link to this photo so you can also see it within your group. But this is a photo of 2 jars holding water, and then each jar also has what we call a soil cage holding a clump of soil. So look at that photo in your group and just sort of discuss, share with each other what your observations are. What do you see? What do you think this test is for? What do you think it tells us? And then we'll come back and share, and I can tell you just a little bit more about this, and we can discuss what you observed. So yeah, we can go ahead and break into groups. All right, welcome back, you all. Is everyone back from their chat rooms, breakout rooms? Awesome. And while we were in breakout rooms, I tried to answer some of the questions in the chat. So you should see some updates there. I believe also at some point we'll share my email address and you're welcome to send me additional questions. But let's just take a second to share. If anyone wants to unmic, maybe we have time for 1 or 2 observations, and then feel free to share other observations in the chat. Anyone feeling up for sharing? All right, I'm looking at the chat. Oh, go ahead.
I just noticed the one to the right, both the soil sample looks a little lighter and there's more sediment on the bottom. And I'm curious if any teams have any guesses of why, like what might be the difference between that soil sample and the one to the left. Anybody have a guess?
Let's see, one guess possibly. Could we not have the one that dissolved quickly? Could we not have as many as what was referred to as livestock in there? So earthworms and microbes creating exudates to help bind the soil together, maybe.
Yep. I love your terminology. It seems like you've been nerding out on some soil science, about the exudates. Awesome. Any other observations? Cool. Well, less water holding capacity. Cool. So this test is referred to generally as a slake test or soil aggregate stability test. And so what we do is this test really, we're looking at contrast. That's where the strength is of this test, is really in seeing as much contrast as possible. So we are looking at, this is actually, I didn't realize it when I chose this photo, but this is actually from Rafa's farm. And I looked back at the photographs to provide the link, and I realized, oh, this is from Rocky Acres. So one sample on the left is from undisturbed soil. And then on the right is from soil that has seen some tillage. And so you can see the aggregates in the undisturbed soil hold together. They don't break apart once they're submerged in soil. So with this test, you submerge the clumps of soil at the same time. And I took this photo after 1 minute. So you see a lot more clarity on the left. The aggregates are just holding together. And as someone mentioned before, I believe it was Jessica, it's those microorganisms, the soil livestock that exude glues that hold the aggregates together and create more aggregate stability. And when you have these aggregates, you just generally have less erosion, better infiltration, more pore space, etc. All the things that we want. And I forgot to mention fungi. Of course, we cannot forget about fungi that are really key to creating those glues. So yeah, I think I'm happy to move on from this unless anyone else has questions or observations concerning this test. This is definitely one that we include. This is actually my favorite test because you don't really need that. I answered one of the questions in the chat where a lot of these tests you can track change over the time, but this is kind of instant. You can just like instantly test sort of like what your soil is like compared to an undisturbed soil. So yeah, you can take the undisturbed sample from a grassy field, a fence line, somewhere that just hasn't seen tillage or has seen less tillage. Yeah, so I love those chat comments. It's very mycelium solidarity. I love that. Cool. Well, I think we're probably good to move on to just general Q&A. Rafa, I forgot if you had any introductions to our Q&A or if we're just going for it.
I mean, this is it.
Yeah.
I think it is a good time to go into questions and maybe just to start by answering one that I did see in the chat. That is a pretty big one, right? So like you've done these tests, now what? Right? These are diagnostic tests. It's things that you find out more of the current state of what your soil is doing. It doesn't, sometimes you might have a test and you're like, oh my goodness, there's nothing alive in my soil. Like, what am I supposed to do? It's dying. I want to help it. And there's remediation steps to take. There's also, ways to build soil to attract the things that you want to see, to have the biology be present, ways to inoculate soil with different mycelium or bacteria that are going to help these things along. But without doing a diagnostic test, you won't know where to start, right? You might be introducing way more biology into something that is already full of biology, right? Where you might need to actually work on the soil structure. That might be the thing that's limiting factor. Or it might come back and you're like, everything looks great on this soil. There's high levels of arsenic. What am I supposed to do now? Those kind of things. So these are the tests that you can do in the field, in the lab, have other people perform for you, perform with other folks in your community, and then take steps. We haven't gone too far into that. Like, what do you do next? But this is a good baseline to find out what's going on. But yes, what other questions might be on folks' mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to just add to that, like you can definitely identify constraints, and that's something that you might already know, but maybe you confirm with one of the tests. Like if you're seeing some compaction, for instance, you can choose to do an infiltration test or a soil hardness test. And if you want to really gauge, like, I've been adding so much organic matter, or I stopped tilling, or I'm only tilling once a year now instead of, more than once, and you want to track that change, you can repeat that same test every year to see what kind of improvements. One of the most powerful moments that I've had was when I did an infiltration test in a really heavily tilled vegetable field. It had been just heavily tilled for like 20 years. And then right next door, the field right like 50 feet away, it was a perennial asparagus patch. The infiltration time was almost an hour in the vegetable field. It took almost an hour for an inch of water to sink in. The perennial field was 4 seconds. And it was just, to me, like spoke volumes. And that's the sort of thing that I think can be really powerful about these tests, either in the moment or tracking that change over time. I think that we didn't previously share links to the guides. I know that you all probably received them in an email, but there is the section of the guide where it's a smaller part of the section as far as like what like next steps, what are the soil carbon sequestration strategies, but I think they're a great starting point. And I noticed there was a question in the chat about additional resources. We do have some additional resources in that section as far as soil carbon sequestration strategies. Some resources as far as like choosing cover crops, et cetera. And we also have an additional resources list. And I did my best to try to find some Spanish language resources as well. That has been like a wonderful part of this project that I've been learning to just like what other additional Spanish language resources. So hopefully we can find more of those as well to include in any updated versions of the guide. But yeah, definitely if you haven't taken a peek, that's like a great starting point with additional resources. Awesome. Did we have any other questions that came up in the chat?
So I'm looking at what are some things that came up in the chat, unique ways that folks have started to build their own initial soils and or raised bed. I see a couple chat comments around raised beds. Raised beds, also very old indigenous technology. It prevents soil compaction. It's a permanent, or called a permanent bed. It's and people have different ways of doing them. You might build a frame out with wood and then bring in soils. I'm familiar with this in the Bronx with some of the toxic soils that were there. The only thing we can do is create a barrier to those soils while we're remediating them, and then bring in healthy soil that isn't toxic to grow in. So that's one way to start a raised bed. Or you can mound, right? So keep adding organic things that are eventually going to break down your browns, your greens, your carbons, your nitrogens to form soil. And then in that, you'll start to attract all the microorganisms, the earthworms, the beneficial insects, the fungi. You can inoculate. There's so many different ways to build your soil. And I think it's important to note, there's so much information around soil. One of something that people say is, you're older than dirt. Dirt is really old. Our dirt has been here for a really long time. And we are able as farmers, as gardeners, as stewards, actually build it and leave it for other people to grow in a healthy way. But we have to start with knowing what we're dealing with. So when we're attacking the problem or, promoting the solutions that are necessary. And we have a couple questions around recommendations for books. The guide, I would definitely start with the guide. There are some resources there, books and reference materials. There are some of the maps that Briana mentioned that come out of the US's soil map survey. It's a really good place to start with certain things if you're here in the north part of Turtle Island. And pasture, I want to touch on this briefly because a lot of the stuff gears towards vegetable production. That turkey in one of the photos, that's my turkey Norman. I grow livestock, and anywhere that we've actually grown vegetables on our farm, we have run livestock there first to build the soil. So actually the first thing that we want to help promote is grass and pasture, and make sure that there's healthy food for those animals to eat. And that's a little bit of a different process in terms of tillage, like what you're putting in seeds and what you're measuring in order for those animals to succeed there, leave their nutrients, and then you can turn that into, we only use that for primary tillage. So that's there's some information around there. Be happy to provide some more too.
I think there was a question about starting, let me see. I apologize. So I have a little 2-week-old kitten that I am fostering, and he's very noisy right now. I think there was a question about, I have a question about turning pasture grass into garden soil with a no-till layering system. Next spring, what kind of tools can I use to turn soil without tilling? I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear what Rafa suggests.
I've done this. I think I was just talking about some of this. Hand tools. If you depends on what kind of space you're trying to use. My 2 favorite tools, the grub hoe, or like the big flat, it's a foot wide hoe that's used for digging, and you can pull back some of the side from that and then start to layer. I would open up the sod first, peel back the grass, and then put more carbon and layer it. So cardboard, wood chips, and then add the nitrogen, grass clippings, hay mulch, things that come out of your other livestock production, chicken manure or anything like that. And then my favorite tool, number 1, is the broad fork. Broad fork, it is a giant hand tool. You use 2 hands and almost your whole body. It's a great workout. Yes, you rock. And it's like some tines that come down into the soil. Right. And it does till up a bit. It aerates, but it doesn't create the same soil disturbance that you would get from, using machinery or tractors. It's great on a small scale.
Okay. I'm kind of doing it on about a half an acre. And what I started with, I'm totally new to this, to no tilling. So I thought, I'm laid out cardboard and I've laid out compost. And then I thought, man, maybe I should have aerated, the pasture grass beforehand, before I did this process. But now the cardboard's down on a half acre of compost. And then I'm, gonna do some amendments and straw and, layer it from there, maybe some mulch, and then throw in a cover crop. But now that I've, I was wondering if that's going to be like kind of a doozy for me to get through, that pasture grass, if I'm going to kill it out well enough without aerating it first. So I guess is kind of my worry.
Yes, I've done that before. You can still do it later, let the cardboard break down a bit. If not, you're like tearing things up. But I would say let the biology do the hard, heavy work. You can get some animals that run in there and till it up for you, or plant really deep tap roots, like daikon radish, sunflowers, those things that have really long, deep roots, and that will pierce through the cardboard and help you build some more aeration in space.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all we have time for in terms of questions. So I believe, did we share our contact info? Certainly you all can send questions by email. Happy to answer them or point you in the right direction if I don't know the answer to the question. And Rafa, I think you're introducing our closing artist.
Yes, so it is my honor, my pleasure, to introduce a fellow soil steward, land activist, and bringing in some of the word around some of these practices that, you know, we can take a very heady approach, but I think this, I think more intellectually is coming from the heart space, which connects us to some of the sacred things and why we do this and how. So Naima has a beautiful piece that they'll share with us today around soil. So without further ado.
Thank you so much for that intro, Rafa, and for inviting me to share this piece. Very honored to offer this poem to you that I wrote while here at Soulfire Farm. Really try to tune into the voice of the soil, knowing the soil has been around for generations and generations and witnessed so much of what has taken place on and through land. So I offer this to y'all in the voice of Black Gold. I am evidence of love under fingernails, kneecaps stained from kneeling to pray, sacred remains of yesterday, fertile with future. I am musk after rain, soft, firm, unconditional embrace, bosom of returning. I am the earth and floor slapped with soles of feet, origin story and sorcery. I am vast and cosmic compost, sand, silt, stone, composition of decomposed bones and primordial ferns reborn. I am sun turned to rot, particles of stardust heaped in terracotta pots, this thing the living clings to, nascent seedling, ancient tree, this melanin-rich thickness, dripping mineral and mystery. I am galactic blackness, hummus of fecundity. I am mud, clung to cassava root in the lower holds of slave ships, the soggy clay. I raised up sugarcane, fed cotton profits of enslavement. I am arid trails, scorched with tears of First Nations dislocation, earth snatched from Japanese farmers' grasp thrust into concentration. I am gang raped by colonization, who changed his name to capitalism, but retains the same enslavement, the erasure and breakage of all my relations for global market chocolate, whose growers face starvation. I am the sweet smell of freedom. I am promised past plantation, the ground under Harriet's railroad, the cracks in pavement post-migration. I spawned the roots that pushed through shoots that subverted subjugation. I am loam, lush with nitrogen and Dr. Carver's legume fields. I am the calcium in the Black Panther's free breakfast meals. I am the cooperative acres Fannie Lou Hamer made real, the once toxic lots Hattie Carthen's garden plots healed. I am ashes of burned Monsanto seed stamped under the feet of Haitian revolutionaries. I am red hot with tomatoes from Taco Bell boycotts, fertilized by the fruit Immokalee farmers left to rot. I am proof of life after death. I am dawning from decay, mass graves in my belly, my open palms spawn gardens, transmuter of toxins, cauldron of embryos, cradle of coffins, atmospheric alchemist sequestering carbon. I am dust, bleached, stripped, strained by purveyors of pipelines and mountaintop explosions, erosion of homelands, washed to oceans, borderlands encroaching. I am choking. I am swept up and stepped upon, guzzled by the gluttonous. I am paradise paved over, poison drenched, drained of sustenance. I buttress monocultures of monopolies to feed cultures of injustice. I am cultivated by machete. I am defended by cutlass. Silent utterance, I am thunderous. I am umber ochre, saffron, sienna, crimson, cinnamon, cocoa, brown, and ebony. I am gold, gold, gold. You are soiled, filthy, black dirt, rich. You are soul, soul, soul. Take me in your palms. Breathe in my memory. Remember me, fall soft where you belong, my seed. I need you. The future depends on me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So yes, honored to share that piece and so grateful to be part of this incredible team. My huge gratitude for all the knowledge and wisdom you just dropped on us, Rafa and Briana. What a gift. And not only this 90-minute webinar, but the beautiful guide and the incredible videos that we get to, you know, continue to pour into and share with our communities. So good. I also want to give a huge thank you to our interpreters, Nayra and Yudith, who have been interpreting every word that has been spoken to make sure our Spanish community can understand. And also to Ale, who's been holding down, translating everything that's coming through the chat. Big shout out to Brittany for holding down the chat today and supporting with tech. And thank you to all of you for showing up, for all the work that you do, stewarding soil and taking care of our communities, you know, really working in partnership with the land. So as we close out, I want you to all share if there's something you're taking away or appreciating in this moment in one word. Go ahead and put it in the chat. Something you are taking away or appreciating. And as you do that, if you also have video, I want to encourage you to turn your video on. We're going to switch to gallery view so that we can really see all of us, all the beautiful beings who we're in community with right now. Switch to gallery view. Get your camera on. Peace community, it's so good to see y'all. All right, so keep them coming. I'm gonna read out what we got so far. We are taking with us ancestry, sharing, vision, connection, grounded, gratitude, us, carbon, community, and knowledge. Ashe, ashe. And soul. Beautiful. Ancestry, heritage, power. Yes, yes, yes. Thank y'all so much. If you want to make like a shape or a pose, I'm gonna do a little group photo, a little screenshot of us. So yeah, just get in any pose that kind of expresses how you're feeling right now. Beautiful. Hold it, hold it. Lovely. Okay, we'll send that out with the follow-up email. Make sure you check out those resources. In the chat, Brittany's offering how to stay in touch with Rafa and Briana. And feel free if you want to also exchange with each other. We're going to keep the room open for another 3 minutes or so, playing a song by a dear friend, Be Steady. So we'll keep that music going in case y'all want to just take some time to private message each other or message everyone in the chat with any closing thoughts or connections. All right. Thanks everyone so much. Stay blessed, stay safe.
Thank you. green love. Yes. You got that summer sweet. I got the greenest thumb. I promise when you come, we gon' be planting seeds. Planting seeds, baby, 'cause I'm gonna give you the best greens in my garden. I'll pick the biggest leaf. I'm gonna get the biggest leaf. I'm gonna give you the best greens in my garden. I need you healthy for me, healthy for me. I wanna keep you here for 100 years. I wanna run through trees. I want you running right in front of me. Let's go and play with dirt. Let's go and save the earth. Ooh, this love is so alive, 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 alive. Tomatoes big and full. Big and full, baby. My basil grows like a weed. Grows like wheat, honey. Got sage and I got time. The sun makes you look so fine. So girl, come and water with me. Water with me, 'cause I'm gonna give you the best greens in my garden. I'll pick the biggest leaf. I'm gonna get the biggest leaf. I'm gonna give you the best greens in my garden. I need you healthy for me, healthy for me. Looking in your eyes makes me feel alive. 'Cause before you came, I was just a seed trying to germinate. Let's grow above the dirt. Let's grow above the hurt. Ooh, this love is so alive, 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 alive. Breathe in the freshest air. Breathe it in. Bathe in the sweet sunlight. Swim in it, swim in it. Ooh, honey, get you some. I promise when you come, my garden gives you life. Gives you life, baby, 'cause I'm gonna give you the best greens in my garden. I'll pick the biggest leaves, the biggest leaves. I'm going to give you the best greens in my garden. I need you healthy for me, healthy for me. I'm gonna give you the best greens in my garden. I pick the biggest leaf. I'm gonna give the biggest leaf. I'm gonna give you the best greens in my garden. I need you healthy for me. I'm gonna give healthy for me. This joy